Have you ever wanted to know what a professional editor can do for your podcast? Well, you're in the right place. Hello, I'm Jason Sanderson from PodcastTech.com, where we take the hard work out of your editing. Now, one of our specialities here at PodcastTech.com, and one of the reasons why our customers choose us or the other production companies, is how detailed our editing process is. It's our strength as a company. Most podcasters know they really should be working with an editor, but most have no idea what that actually looks like. So in today's video, we'll be demystifying exactly what we do when editing your show and maybe a little on how others fall short. Pretty good. So why edit your show at all? The real reason why editing is so important when it comes to audio-only formats is your attention span and capacity to retain information without distraction is different depending on whether you've got more or less senses involved. Everything from a host shuffling a question cards, a guest putting a cup down, stuttering, uncomfortably long pauses, bumping into the mic. So, if retaining the listener is important to you, and it should be, if you want your listener to go away having learned something and want them coming back for more, if you want your listener gripped to the conversation and at no point confused or displaced in distraction, you need to be editing your podcast. I'm going to go through a bunch of examples of how you can improve your show to make it much more listenable. The examples you're going to hear today are taken from the Jordan Harbinger Show, episode 616 with Martin Kove, a.k.a. Sensei Kreese from Karate Kid and Cobra Kai, a.k.a. Mr. Bad Guy who pouts a lot.
Mercy is for the weak.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it. So on the screen, you'll see Jordan is in red and Martin is in green. So what I've got here is quite a few examples of what I'd normally edit, all within the same small section of audio. So let's take a listen.
Because I was hostile in my audition. I was doing Cagney and Lacey.
What do you mean you were hostile in your audition?
Now you can hear Jordan's interrupting Martin, thinking that Martin had finished what he was saying, coming in with the next question, but he'd not finished yet. Jordan then realised that he was interrupting and stopped speaking, which is good interviewer etiquette. Please do that. You can go check out my interview technique video for more information if you haven't seen that yet. So what I normally do is I would mute the interrupt. Let's just have a listen again.
In my audition, and I was doing Cagney and Lacey.
What do you mean you were hostile?
Now you can also hear right before Martin speaks, he has a bad habit of making these vocal tics. Loud breathing, and then smacking his lips right before he speaks.
And I was doing Cagney and Lacey.
So we'll split the region. Now let's drop a fade in. Sometimes when you get rid of a breath, for example, you sometimes need to shorten that gap as well because you've exaggerated the silence with that fade being in place.
My audition, and I was doing Cagney and Lacey.
So that seems like a nice transition now with a nice fade, so you can't hear the breath and the lip smacks anymore. And also I'll mute underneath where Jordan speaks, where Martin is no longer speaking, and the same when Jordan isn't speaking but Martin is. Whenever someone isn't speaking, you should really be muting that channel.
What do you mean you were hostile in your audition?
Now Martin also coughs, so we'll get rid of that. He does a mouth smack again, so we'll get rid of that. Also tighten up this gap. Let's find a natural cadence.
You mean you were hostile in your audition?
Well, it's a funny story.
Something else that you can also experiment with is getting rid of these leading words that might not be relevant to the answer. So it seems in this case he's talking about the example that is going to be given as being a funny story, but why not just jump straight into the actual answer he's giving rather than keeping these leading words?
I go in, I get a call, I go into the casting woman, she says, here's the script, Martin.
He could even come in on, I get a call.
Your audition.
I get a call, I go into the casting woman, she says, here's the script, Martin.
Now this is something that you're going to have to experiment with because you need to make sure you're not cutting something that might be worth keeping. Remember, the goal is to avoid distractions. If your edit becomes distracting by missing a nice transition or a valuable piece of information, then you're doing your editing wrong. So let's get rid of these mouth noises on the end.
And I get a call,
So did you hear that? It's like he's making a funny noise in between the words.
and I get a call, I go in, I get a call, I go into the casting woman, she says, here's the script, Martin.
And then what do we have here? An absolute huge breath. Let's get rid of that. And then he interrupts himself. This is not Jordan interrupting him. He's interrupting himself.
Nice lady. She says her name is Caro Jones.
And we can get rid of that she says because it doesn't really make grammatical sense. And it seems a little disjointed, so we can cut up to her name is Carol Jones.
Nice lady. Her name is Carol.
Let's just make this, put a little bit more space.
Nice lady. Her name is Carol. Nice lady. Her name is Carol.
Don't be afraid of doing multiple versions of the same edit to get it right. If you don't get it right first, all it takes is a little jiggling around to find the most appropriate edit.
Jones. And she said,
And then a huge breath again. So we'll fix that.
and she says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the.
Now we've got So let's cut that and tidy it up with a crossfade between them.
She says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John. She says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John Alvin. She says, we'll call you in on.
Again, it takes a few shuffles just to find the most appropriate edit. Don't just abandon an edit so quickly. There's usually a way of making these kind of things work. And if it doesn't work, leave that part in place. Maybe we can get rid of the crossfades here and just have it fade in and out normally.
Says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John. And she says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John Avildsen.
Let's add a little bit of space here.
She says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John Avildsen.
And then a huge breath again at the end.
And she says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John Avildsen.
Also, let's mute here where Jordan's not speaking and where Martin is speaking.
And I was doing Cagney and Lacey.
What do you mean you were hostile in your audition?
I go in, I get a call. I go into the casting woman. She says, here's the script, Martin. Nice lady. Her name is Carol Jones. And she says, we'll call you in on Friday to meet the director, John Avildsen.
So now that seems like a nicer transition. We've got rid of those mouth noises. We've got rid of the coughs. We've got rid of Jordan interrupting. We've tightened up some of the pauses. And it all seems to pace really nicely now and just flows really well.
I say, Carol, I haven't worked on this script.
So here's an edit that I rarely see other editors do. Obviously, when people laugh at something funny, that's really cool and it adds to the dynamic of the conversation. But sometimes that laugh doesn't come across as sounding like a laugh. It comes across as a tss or a ss or a So it comes across as a weird burst of noise that sometimes can be distracting in the conversation. So what I would suggest doing is you can either mute that laugh if it works fine without it, if the material is just as funny without the laugh being there, or even better, you can copy a better laugh from previously in the conversation or later in the conversation where it's actually sounded like a laugh, and then paste that in place of the weird one. Same thing applies with any problem audio. Maybe there's a word that has a bad noise at the same time of it, or there's a dropout, or some kind of breakup in the audio. Well, if it says the same word and it sounds better later on or earlier on in the conversation, copy it. Drop a better spoken word from elsewhere in the conversation. Treat what content and resources you have at your disposal as a way of making an artificial overdub. Like I say, you can just about always make something work.
Was there another reason? And when did you find out, like...
So here's a good example of stuttering, where Jordan comes into his next question, something we can easily make more concise.
Was there another reason? And when did you find out, like...
So usually we don't need or, and. That many of the same synonyms. That many synonyms as conjunction words all stacked consecutively. So we can probably get rid of all that.
Reason? And when did you find out, like, okay, wait a minute, I changed... Was there another reason? And when did you find out, like...
So that's cleaned up nicely. Here's a great example. You can hear Martin stumbling over his words, and we can quite easily fix this.
You know, I saw some of the footage, and I liked it, and I used it as an acting reel for myself. I was working in Eugene, Oregon, and like my wife at the...
So we can get rid of that and close that gap nicely. And we can also get rid of that breath as well.
I was working in Eugene, Oregon, and like my wife at the time...
And the word like, it's just a filler word where he's thinking about what to say next. It bears no relevance to the answer, and we can get rid of that.
Working in Eugene, Oregon, my wife at the time...
Here's a big breath again.
To see the movie.
And a lip smack.
My son, to see the movie.
Cool.
It was about the subtleties of...
Sometimes if you're in normal conversation face to face, it's quite acceptable just to be making these agreeing and disagreeing noises as part of the conversation. But when it comes to podcasts, it's quite annoying to have this as a background noise all the time. To be fair, Jordan doesn't do it that much. But I have other clients that are nightmares for this, just agreeing all the time over the top of the conversation, and there's no need. Just Put your finger on your lips and don't say a thing. It might actually be really engaging for the people in the conversation to keep the flow going, but it certainly isn't engaging for the listener. So Karate Kid, chop that wherever you can.
In Karate Kid 1, and he wasn't turned on by them losing.
So I'm not sure how much of this is picking up in the YouTube recording, but right here, Martin must have knocked the microphone while he's speaking with either his chin or his mouth. He's made this popping noise and it's blowing out the low end in the microphone. You can hear it almost like a low end thud.
And he wasn't turned on by them losing.
This is where I would normally take this small section of audio and send it over to Isotope RX. Rather than trying to use a declicker or a deplosive or filtering out that noise across the entire file, I'm going to isolate this small little section and process just that individually. Then once it's processed, I'll bring it back in and replace the section with a new clean file. So sometimes when I do take the audio over into Isotope RX for a cleanup, it's nice to have a reference of what that noise sounds like in its isolated form outside of those vocal frequencies.
It's not written. You have to.
So right here, you can hear when Martin's not speaking, he's making that same kind of mic bump noise from earlier. That's going to make it really easy as a reference to learn that noise profile. I can use this to easily isolate only the voice and get rid of that pesky noise the next time it comes up in the conversation. Just eliminating the noise and not the voice. So here's another example where there's some background noise, pops or bangs. Maybe it's just a mouth noise.
He wasn't ecstatic.
So we can get rid of those. Again, with some fades, just get rid of some of these breaths and tighten those pauses up a little bit.
If they did win, he wasn't ecstatic. You know, it was just...
Then you can hear some vocal ticks at the end of this word. Let's get rid of that.
Just a level of, I guess, almost...
So let's get rid of that double of.
A level of, I guess, almost these...
And I don't think it needs that, I guess.
A level of almost these...
It doesn't need the almost either.
A level of preserving what he finds important, which is to be triumphant.
So that makes much more grammatical sense. Let's have a listen to this.
Versus what the director has in his vision, right?
Yeah.
How do you... This might be a question that you can't answer, but we'll see. How do you go about learning the attributes of people that you aren't necessarily...
You can hear Jordan's going into the next question, but it's almost like he stumbles and rethinks what he's going to ask and changes his mind. So we're going to need to abridge this and get rid of some of those pointless words and just make it flow a lot better.
How do you go about learning... How do you go about learning the attributes of...
Let's pop back in on this section of audio.
As in his vision, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about learning the attributes has in his vision, right?
Yeah.
We don't need the right.
Has in his vision.
Yeah.
How do you go about learning the attributes of people that you aren't necessarily...
And you should also mute any audio when the other person's not speaking.
To your advantage. So how do you absorb...
Let's get rid of this vocal tick.
Advantage. So how do you absorb character traits of somebody you advantage? So how do you absorb character traits of somebody you admire or need to become more like?
We could probably tighten that pause up.
More like, whether it's in acting or real life.
And then Martin is obviously thinking about his answer for a while, but it doesn't need to be that long. So let's snap that back a bit. Cool.
For months and months and months.
Yeah, it's almost like... Oh, go ahead. Sorry. Continue.
Yeah, so there's no pill you can take.
So this is a really obvious one. Maybe we just pop in on there's no pill.
There's no
Get rid of the It's just a filler word.
There's no pill you can...
Let's get rid of that breath.
There's no pill you can take. There's no medication. A character that you're entertaining for months and months and months. There's no pill you can take.
So that's now an abridged sentence that flows so much better.
Nominated for stunt work for an Emmy.
So here, Martin stutters over his words. Another example, which I like to do a lot, is where you join the audio in the back end of the word rather than the front end of the word, so we can snap the S back so it has an overlap with the previous word. It's not an obvious thing to edit from the back end of the word. Most people edit from the front where it's a really obvious cut. But sometimes you can yield smoother results by tagging it onto the back end of another word instead of it being at the beginning.
Nominated for stunt work for an Emmy 2 years.
Then Jordan interrupts with one of these agreeing noises, which really doesn't add to anything to the conversation, so let's get rid of that. Let's mute all the audio where Jordan's not speaking, and same for Martin. Always do that. Martin then pops in twice trying to continue his answer over Jordan speaking. So let's mute that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
But, we all like it.
And close that gap tightly.
At all.
But, we all like it.
Let's close that gap a bit.
Years in a row.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all.
But, we all like it.
Let's have a listen to this.
Pick up a script. You're right back in.
So here's a good example of one of those moments where a guest is making a noise that's in reference to some of the visual stuff that's going on in the YouTube video that's accompanying this. And in this case, it is making a gun noise while gesturing with his fingers. So it might be fine in video, but it seems a bit redundant and slightly annoying in audio form to not really be adding anything to the conversation. It's just distracting. I mean, people don't really know what he's referring to if you've not got the visual. So does it need the noise? I don't think so.
Always there when you pick up a script. You're right back in. So many characters were like in this darkness,
Yeah, that's
It's
what
good,
when they're
though.
trying to, like on Dateline, when it's like, we can't show his face because the mafia will definitely come after him. So we're going to put him in this weird lighting. Yeah.
Right.
That's where we're at right now in studio.
Do you want us to lighten it?
No, it's actually perfect.
I like it. It's good.
It is good. I was just thinking, like, wow, this is like perfect lighting for, for one of your characters anyway, I suppose. I have to say, you're in pretty damn good shape for.
And again, there's a part here in the conversation where it's more like bat chat to each other about something that's going on visually. Again, this might work okay in video form where they're referring to lighting in the room. But to us listening in audio-only format, we can't see that lighting. We don't know what's going on. It's a bit jarring to the listener to be thinking about what takes them away from the value content that they've been taking in up until previously. So let's just get rid of all that. There's no need for any of that.
It was all about Watergate. And it was all about Watergate.
I have to say, you're in pretty damn good shape.
And we'll get rid of this little vocal tick.
You're in pretty damn. I have to say
We can even get rid of the "you're in" because he says it again in a moment.
I have to say, seemingly you're in pretty damn good shape for. Are you?
Maybe.
I have to say, seemingly you're in pretty damn good shape for. Are you 7?
So that sounds a lot smoother too. So what I normally do when editing most episodes is I'd start at the beginning and I'd work through the entire session, cutting all these little things like what we just spoken about, anything that I notice as it comes up. And I know what you're thinking, that probably takes forever to do. And yes, it does. So if we zoom out here on what was the final edited episode that got released, you can see there's a lot of edits. A lot of edits. A lot of edits. Obviously, working in such detail is going to take time, and it's often where most production companies fall short. So usually, to edit content on this level, we're talking 10 minutes of raw audio material is going to take about an hour of work to edit. I can usually do an hour-long conversation in about 6 hours. So as you can see, every time I make an edit, it adds another number onto the region in this session. This session is about an hour long, including ads and extras. There are a whopping 5,828 edits just in the content alone for this session. That's a lot of edits. So that's how much detail we're talking for a professionally edited show at the top of the iTunes charts. Now, compare that to what other people may be doing, where it's about 4 or 5 edits throughout the entire show. That sums up to be a huge difference, especially in quality. So that's where your money goes when you hire us. So when the edits are in place and the listener can absorb the information that's important to them and remain totally blind to all these distractions and anything that will lead them away from retaining that valuable information, your listener's going to come back time and time again because your show's always consistent and fault-proof. I think that covers most of what I do when editing the content of an episode. If I think of more, I'll have to make another video about it, but I'll also be covering adding intros, outros, ads, and embedding music in another video, so subscribe so you'll automatically get those when they drop.
Please do it.
What are you waiting for? Just do it. If you like this video, please share it with a podcasting friend. Hopefully we can help them out with their show. I've been Jason Sanderson from PodcastTech.com. What's been your podcasting challenges this week, apart from editing podcasts?